Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to present on the topic of cybersecurity. My name is Karen Appelgren. I'm the director of the Zions Bank Business Resource Center. The Business Resource Center is set up to help aspiring entrepreneurs or established business owners start, grow, and get financing. We provide complimentary business workshops like this session today, as well as complimentary business counseling. You can make a one-on-one appointment to speak with us for business planning help, or help with your financial projections, to discuss marketing strategies and tactics, or any other business topic that would help you to be more successful. Our workshops and our counseling are open to the public regardless of where you bank, so we encourage you to take advantage of our resource center. We're excited to partner with Holland & Hart today to deliver this important topic on cybersecurity. Our guest presenter today is Claire Roston, and she will be leaving some time at the end for some question and answer. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat section. This seminar is being recorded, and we'll be able to send you the slides and the recording afterwards in a follow-up email. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Claire Roston to begin the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And just to make sure, can everyone hear me well? If you can't, write in the Q&A that there's an issue. And please use the Q&A or the chat to put in any comments or questions you have as I go about these slides. When I originally gave this presentation, I did it in a room at the Boise Startup Week in the fall, pre-COVID. We could all get together and have a conversation, and this presentation is really designed to be much more of a conversation and led by the interest and things that are going on with the small businesses that I'm talking with. So I recognize we don't have that format today, and it may be less engaging, but I do welcome any questions you have. I'll try to talk about or respond to them throughout the presentation, or just change kind of what I'm talking about based on the comments or questions you're having. And if you don't have any, that's great too, or you can put them in later. I'm happy to send you an email or correspond after this talk about anything that comes up for you. So moving on, today I'm presenting on data privacy and security for small businesses. And my name is Claire Roston. I'm an attorney at Holland & Hart. I am in the corporate group. I do a lot of buying and selling of businesses, helping businesses start up, maintain their operations, sell, just really the entire life cycle. But an area of focus that I have that I work on with my clients and also do kind of like specialty work just in data privacy is in the data privacy and security arena, focusing on U.S. law, but I'm also familiar generally with what's going on worldwide and particularly in Europe, since which I'll get to with a little bit more detail soon, the European Union's general protection, data protection regulation has kind of set the gold standard for how we go about data privacy and security. So moving on to the next slide, which is the first question, why? Why as a small business should you care at all about data privacy and security? And I'll kind of walk through some of the different reasons. If you have any questions or thoughts, please let me know. So in the U.S., we're starting to see more comprehensive data privacy, and with privacy follows security, because you need to be able to comply with privacy, you have to have data secure. So we're starting to see much more comprehensive data privacy legislation. The first comprehensive legislation to be passed was the California Consumer Protection Act in 2018. It wasn't enforced until July 1 of this year. there was a number of amendments that occurred. Regulations needed to be adopted. The regulations actually are only in final form but have not been adopted yet. We're expecting to see that adoption at the end of this month. And before the CCPA was enacted and then became effective this year, there were some more narrow but comprehensive acts that were adopted. So like in Nevada, there is a notice and opt-out act that was adopted in the fall of last year. And that it's a smaller version of CCPA, but we're starting to see principles where basically consumers, the data about them, it's their data, they own it. They have the right to get access to it and to tell people who have data about themselves what to do with it, whether it's to change it because it's inaccurate or to delete it, and to tell businesses or other parties that have data about themselves if they can sell it or not. And a lot of these comprehensive data privacy laws, whether they've been enacted, like in California and Nevada, or they're under consideration in state legislatures, they really focus on providing some basic consumer rights. So the first would be like a right to know. Just what does another business or does a person have about me or my household? Then right to access that data and a right to opt out, meaning if there's data that a business has about me, I can tell that business that business cannot sell data about me. And then also a right of deletion. California also has another right called the right to non-discrimination, and that right is specifically meant to address where businesses may give preferential treatment to consumers who permit selling of their data, various things like that. I haven't seen that type of right, consumer right in other legislation, but I wouldn't be surprised if it creeps up in other states. And the California Consumer Protection Act really took a page from European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR. GDPR was the first comprehensive data privacy act to be implemented in like a far-reaching way, because in Europe, there's so many international businesses that operate in Europe, operate in the U.S., operate other places in the world. A lot of businesses had to change their practices to comply with GDPR. And it had the same type of framework. Consumer rights, they own their data, they can say what to do with the data, and then provisions around security of the data and regulations about businesses that are the controller of the data, and then their service providers who do things with the data on the controller's behalf. And so oftentimes with the CCPA, when we're scratching our heads as to what something means, the regulations helped but didn't clear up everything. We oftentimes look to just the general framework of GDPR and what's considered acceptable or best practice as a way to proceed with compliance of CCPA. Before these comprehensive data privacy acts came into operation or became effective, in the U.S., the standard was the Federal Trade Commission Act. And the Federal Trade Commission Act has two components that are enforced by the FTC. First, the businesses cannot misrepresent or deceive consumers. And the point of that is that if a business makes representations about receiving data from individuals about the individual, so personal information, and then it doesn't hold it securely, does not take reasonable steps to protect that data, the FTC has taken enforcement actions against those businesses. And it's not just representations about what's being done with privacy and security. It also goes so far as just failure to do anything. The Federal Trade Commission has taken the position that it is unreasonable and unfair to hold personal information such as security, social security numbers, driver's licenses, credit card information, and do nothing to protect it. And so where businesses have had pretty egregious security lapses, the FTC has gone after them, even if they haven't made representations about their security. And then for a long time, the states did not all states had data breach notification laws, but after the large Equifax breach, every single state got around to passing their data breach laws. So now, and I see that there's a typo on that slide, it should be data breach, not data break, but with respect to these data breach laws, they laid just a basic groundwork for what needs to be done in terms of protecting personal information. Each state varies in terms of what's regulated. The first question is what is personal information? Some states have much more comprehensive definitions of personal information. Some have much more narrow. In Idaho, it's a much more narrow definition. It's about 10 different things, such as credit card numbers, social security numbers, and if it's encrypted, it doesn't apply. I mean, Idaho is much more narrow. So the good news for a small business, if you have a security incident and you only have data of Idaho residents, you may not even need to notify them of the incident because the law may not require it. These state data breach laws are they apply based on residency of the person whose information is accessed. So even if you're an Idaho business only, you may still need to notify people in California who have moved since you received information from them, or if you do transactions online or remotely, you may also be crossing borders. So the first step during any incident is just to determine what was accessed and if it's about people, where do these people potentially live? California has the most rigorous data breach, the price rise, given CCPA law, and so we typically will use their requirements as the baseline or an approach for best practices and comply with those if there's any California residents involved, and then have those types of notifications and practices made available to every resident regardless of where they're at, because it's a lot easier to, oftentimes in these incidents, to treat every single person affected the same, as opposed to be like, oh, you're from California, you're going to get credit reporting for 2 years, but you're in Idaho, so you don't get anything. And if a data breach notification is required, some states also, like I just said, will require credit monitoring and other services, like a toll-free number for the residents who have been impacted. So if something like this happens, there's a lot of research you can do on your own online, but it can be worth the time to either reach out to an insurer to see if you have resources through a cyber insurance policy or even some type of general policy. Typically, it's not covered under like your typical CGL policy, but they may still have resources for you, or to contact an attorney for an hour or two of consult just to talk through the very basics about what happened and what may be required, or if anything's required. So outside of just legal compliance, there's reasons to take privacy and security seriously, because if you approach it using best practices from the beginning, you're more likely to build the building blocks that ensure like a easy to manage and effective data privacy and security program as you grow, and also to avoid being one of the very unfortunate businesses that end up not being able to keep their doors open after a breach. There's a number of different statistics out there, but it's been pretty widely reported that among data or small businesses that have experienced a data breach or cybersecurity incident, that about more than half of them in the year after that incident are no longer in business. So the operational risk can be huge, and if you don't want this to be the reason why you have to close your doors. The other thing to keep in mind is that now that so many of us are working from home, we are seeing a huge increase in various cyber security incidents. Ransomware has gone up greatly. A lot of hackers are going after weak links as more and more people are working offline. They're always using secure networks. They're getting more emails, making mistakes, touching or clicking on attachments or things they shouldn't, not having as much face-to-face contact with people to verify that what the requests they received were legitimate. And so the risk right now with people working remotely is high. So it's well worth encouraging your employees, if you're not working together in person, to pick up the phone and to confirm, was that email that I just got actually from the person who said it was from, and not just keep moving forward. Always, anytime you're making wire transfers or taking wire information, use secure messaging or other methods and verify by phone. Those are the types of things that can make a really big difference, like the cherry picking in terms of preventing incidents. And reputational risk is a real concern. We all know of Target and the breach that they had with their HVAC vendor, and how it was in the news. It was in the news cycle just for weeks because they kept coming out with new information. The breach was bigger. They misunderstood things initially, then they had to correct themselves, and that led to a lot of problems for Target in the years that followed. We also saw the same thing with the large Equifax breach. So there is a real reputational risk, and particularly if you happen to be a small business in the tech arena, not taking your own data privacy and security seriously can be a real problem when you're trying to gain trust of your clients. And then lastly, one reason why you want to be taking this stuff seriously is because there are contractual obligations to do so. If you are a business that does any point sells with consumer through credit cards, you're signing merchant agreements. Those merchant agreements have the rules known as PCI DSS, and these are contractual provisions that have been put forth by the Credit Card Association to comply with data privacy and security. And they flow down to the individual businesses that are selling items and taking credit cards. And unfortunately, because of the way these are written, small businesses can oftentimes be left holding the bag. A good example of that was P.F. Chang's, where there was a breach and they ended up having to pay most of the money associated with the breach, even though there were problems like up the chain. And then also, if you're operating with other businesses, particularly those in California or that are complying with California CCPA or GDPR, they're mandated to impose security requirements on businesses that they do business with. So there are going to be provisions, or there should be provisions like that in your contracts with them. And you'll also see these contractual obligations in the healthcare arena if you're either a covered entity by HIPAA or you are a business associated with a covered entity. Okay, moving on. So in terms of starting to get a compliance program in place, or really just making an effort to build the right building blocks as you grow your business, the place to start is inventorying your data. Just sitting down and mapping out on a piece of paper and during a conference call, or with a group of people that have knowledge in your business about what type of data is collected, getting together and just making a list and of what data is held by your business. And this pertains to customers, other businesses, but also your own employees. So what type of data do you keep on your employees? Do you have information about their family because of health insurance? Outside of employee data, which almost every single business will have, do you have information about business contacts? In California, some information that is regulated pertains to the business representatives you're doing business with. Also, do you have information about customers? Do you have account logins? Do they need to fill out credit applications? All of those types of things. So it's just thinking about what type of data are you holding. If someone who wasn't supposed to have access to it got access to it, could this be a breach under the breach notification laws, or could it just repose an operational reputational damage? And then once you've figured out what data you're holding, the next question is do you need it? Is it core to your business? Can you stop holding it? It may be that you only need to hold some of this data for a short period of time, and then you can purge it, and maybe you don't need it at all. And the best way as your business grows to get good practices in place is to be selective about what personal data you hold, because it makes it easier to manage, it costs less, and you're at less risk if a breach occurs. Also, if you end up being regulated by the California Consumer Protection Act, which applies to only certain entities, you have to have gross annual revenues of $25 million or more, so you may not it may not apply to you now, and you have to be taking data of California residents, so it's pretty possible in this day and age. Or if you're selling a lot of data or things like that, then if the CCPA does apply to you, there's a lot of requests from consumers or California residents that you need to comply with, such as giving them access to the data, allowing them to change it, being able to delete it, and managing that can be really difficult. So just getting down to the data you need and keeping it for as long as you need it can be a really good practice to institute now. And then also considering sometimes I'll talk with clients and they're getting ready to launch a new project or product, and they're trying to decide where they want to focus on new markets, and they've decided not to go into the California market or into Europe until they're more established or they're growing, because they don't want to start in a market where there's high level of compliance. Or they avoid the healthcare industry as clients so that they're not needing to comply with the regulations under HIPAA as a business associate. So being strategic about where you expand and where you sell your products early on when you're developing can be a really good way to, one, be in compliance, but two, keep costs down. Then once you have a track record, an established product, a system in place, you can go into these markets like California that are more highly regulated, and it won't be as much as a lift to get that compliance program in place. Another thing to be thinking about with small businesses is how you want to approach bringing your own device or using your own device, either from remote work or in the office. A lot of small businesses and startups have their employees use their own devices and computers. If that's the case, then who's thinking through, well, what can I do to make sure that those devices are still secure? Do I have the ability to remote wipe them if there's a problem? Do I have certain policies around password use of Wi-Fi, various things like that? Am I providing any malware? What can you do if you're not providing the device to still ensure that the data of your business on these devices is secure? So it may be that it's just easier to provide the device to manage these issues or concerns than it is to come up with a policies that you enforce. But it's worth thinking through as you have people using their own devices or working from home. the next thing in terms of once you've kind of worked through what do I have and what do I need, next steps for compliance is having a written information security plan. This can literally be like a one-page Word document with just the very basics, or it can be much more elaborate. But at a minimum, what you should be thinking about is what type of incident should be escalated to who. So one of your employees clicks on a link on an email that they thought was fine, and it appears like it actually was a phishing scam, and they're concerned now that there's a problem. Is that something that's get escalated? Does it get escalated to you as the owner or the officer or CEO, or does it go to the IT person? It's those types of like categorizing incidents and communicating with your employees that's important. And then who does it get escalated to? Is it just to the C-suite or the owner or whoever's ultimately in charge? Do you have an IT person? Do you have someone who kind of tends to take those types of issues? Oftentimes you'll see it within the finance realm since they're used to dealing with security measures around payments. And in addition to escalating to that person, do you have other resources? Do you have an attorney who you can call, even just know a name and the phone number if there's an issue? Or do you have just on this the basic information about how to contact the FBI if there's a problem, like wire fraud? The FBI can be really effective in helping with wire fraud. And if you're going to get more elaborate, do you have a PR person that you can reach out to if you start to be concerned that you have an incident that could have reputational damage? Who's your insurance agent, and do you have coverage or potential coverage that you could utilize? So just having like a very basic contact list can be helpful. And then having some basic provisions around how to recover. If, like, for example, if there's a ransomware attack, do you turn off your computer? Do you not? Like just some of the very basic recommended approaches from IT if you believe an incident has just occurred or is ongoing. And once you have some of those basics in place, it's important to start communicating with the other people in your organization. So typically these types of trainings will be, presentations. My firm, we have to do, I think at least once a year, might be twice a year. We have to watch a bunch of different videos and take a number of tests and various things like that. So you can get programs like that. You can just include this as part of like, whether they're like considered safety tips or at the beginning of each meeting. But going over the types of things that that are helpful to your employees, to your business to take these measures. And keep in mind, this type of education is not just useful to protect your business, it's useful to protect your employees' personal information as well. I mean, any one of us can be subject to identity theft, and starting to learn good practices around password management, not using public Wi-Fi for anything other than reading news articles or social media. I mean, you don't want to be logging onto your bank account on a public Wi-Fi network. They're so easy for hackers to get in. Just those types of very basic rules around having what I like to call data security hygiene can be beneficial to communicate to other people in an organization, for them personally, for their families, but then also for your business. And just going over some of the incidents that can happen, like phishing, wire scams, and what can be done to recognize if something's happening, what you can do to prevent it, that type of thing. And lastly, once you've done your training, the next thing to be thinking about is the paper. And if you're a business that operates online, what do you have terms of service or use on your website? Do you have a privacy policy? If you're operating in California, do you have a notice to California residents that's specific to them? And do you have written contracts with service providers or other businesses, and does it address data privacy and security? And areas that data privacy and security may come into play in your business is when you're working with consumers or clients. It's possible that you'll start getting, as your business grows, clients that are going to start vetting you in terms of your security. You could potentially get security questionnaires. Some of these can be Excel spreadsheets with 200 rows, and each row is a question or needs an explanation, and those can be pretty time-consuming to deal with. Businesses, they grow if they're starting to get a lot of the security questionnaires. Oftentimes, they'll try to tackle a response that doesn't involve them responding to each individual questionnaire, but instead they'll get an audit called a SOC 2 audit by an accounting firm that looks at their security measures and has findings. If they can provide the results of that to their customers, the customers will oftentimes accept that audit instead of requiring filling out the security questionnaire. But those audits take time, they're expensive, it takes a lot of work to get ready for them. So oftentimes that happens later in the business cycle. And then also it may be that you're just entering into a contract and it has a whole bunch of provisions about data privacy and security and or representations about what you're doing, and you need to confirm that in fact is true. App stores also require privacy policies in terms of use. So if you are a developer of an app or you decide to have something white labeled, that can come into play. If you are taking credit card information or health information from consumers, another area that you may need, or point in time when you may be required to kind of up your game in terms of data privacy and security is if you're considering buying cyber insurance for the first time. To even be able to get cyber insurance, you have to verify with the insurer that you're doing a number of things. So they're not going to insure you if you don't have certain practices in place. So going through the process of purchasing cyber insurance can be really good for a business because it requires the business to do some of the basic things that are expected by the insurance provider to even get the coverage. And then another time it's going to come into play, though hopefully it's not the first time you really start focusing on data privacy and security, is if you suffer a breach. Hopefully you have some things in place prior to the breach that get you thinking about what you can do to have a compliance program. And I covered a lot of the things on this slide already, but the point of this is that we are seeing much more comprehensive consumer rights-oriented data privacy legislation, and we expect that to continue. Now, I thought it was going to be ramping up at a much greater place until the pandemic hit, and because there was a ton of legislation throughout the U.S. that was pending about data privacy, consumer rights, and those all have gotten stalled. And legislatures just have more important things to be focusing on. So it may be a couple years before these types of acts in other states ramp up. But at some point, when we return to a more normal pre-COVID environment, I would expect to see more states emulating what we're seeing with GDPR and the California Consumer Protection Act. And like I said before, we'll likely see in many states these recognition of these rights to know what data is being collected about you, which means you need to communicate that to individuals at the point of collection. And you can do that through like website privacy policies, giving them access to the data about themselves, giving them the right to delete that data or modify it, giving them the right to say, I don't want my data sold. And then it'll be interesting to see how many more states follow the CCPA and have regulations around whether or not you can, quote unquote, discriminate, or you have to treat people equally regardless of whether or not they're permitting their data to be sold or not. I also mentioned Nevada having its much more narrow version of the CCPA that took effect last fall. And one thing that I just want to mention is that while it's good just in general to ensure that data privacy and security don't force you to close your business down because you have a bad incident, as in terms of compliance and enforcement, regulators are going after the big fish, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world, and they're going after really egregious offenders. So, like, for example, in the healthcare world, in instances where business associates are doing absolutely nothing to protect data, like though they're saying that they are, those are the ones that are getting in trouble, even if they're small. It is not, it's not just kind of a random selection enforcement. It's either egregious offenders or it's really big operations. Well, that takes me through my presentation. If anyone has questions, I welcome them. Otherwise, I'm happy to take anything offline. You can always give me a call or send me an email and to talk through just some of your ideas or questions or thoughts about data privacy and security as you build your business. Great. Well, I'm not seeing any questions at this time. I appreciate everyone attending, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
This is Karen again from the Zions Bank Business Resource Center. Thank you so much, Claire. That was great information. I want to make sure and invite everyone and remind everyone that next week we have another Holland and Hart legal workshop. This one next week on August 19th, Wednesday from 11 to 12, will focus on employment law. If you haven't yet signed up, please do. You can go to www.zionsbank.com/BRC for Business Resource Center workshops, and you'll see our calendar of events. Thank you again for attending, and feel free to follow up with some questions with Claire, and watch for a follow-up email from us later this week. Thank you.